If this video found its way to your screen today, I need you to understand one thing before anything else. In the realm of the psyche, there are no accidents. Arthur Sterling called this synchronicity, the exact moment when the internal world and the external world align to deliver a message you can no longer ignore. And the message is this: you have reached the edge of a precipice that most of humanity spends their entire lives trying to avoid. You have traversed something that felt like the worst moment of your existence. It may have been a loss. It may have been an emotional collapse. It may have been a silent exhaustion that no one around you could comprehend. And you kept wondering what was wrong with you. But what if I told you that nothing was wrong? What if I told you that what you experienced was not a collapse, but a graduation? Arthur Sterling discovered that every soul seeking wholeness eventually encounters what he called the final trial. It is not a test of your intelligence. It is not a test of your physical strength. It is a test of your capacity to survive the death of what you thought you were. Today you will discover why your suffering was in fact a deliberate preparation. You will understand the secret that Sterling discovered during his own Red Book period, the one in which he dove into the abyss of his own psyche and returned transformed. And more importantly, you will discover why this passage activated in you a specific strength, a specific frequency that is about to magnetize into your life a reality you didn't even imagine possible to inhabit. Because the truth is this: whoever passes the final trial does not return as they were before. And the universe, in a movement that seems almost poetic, begins to deliver to that person what they could never have conquered using the old mask. But before reaching this revelation, I need to take you back to the beginning. Because without understanding what happened inside you, you won't be able to recognize the gold that is in your hands now. To understand why you are here, you must first understand the brutal necessity of the collapse you just went through. In the world of Arthur Sterling, nothing is ever truly lost. Everything is only transformed. But for the transformation to happen, there must first be a total, uncompromising destruction. This is the stage that the alchemists called the Great Dissolution. And if you're watching this video, this is exactly the process that has been silently dismantling your life from the inside out. Sterling observed over decades of study that the human personality is rarely built upon a foundation of truth. Instead, we build our lives upon a series of projections. Think of your psyche as a movie projector inside a dark room. During the entire first half of your life, you projected your power, your worth, and your sense of security onto external screens. You projected your authority onto your bosses and mentors. You projected your capacity for happiness onto your romantic partners. You projected your sense of purpose onto your professional titles and your social status. You were not living your life. You were living a movie in which you expected the world to be the protagonist. But the final trial begins the exact moment the projector breaks. Suddenly the screen goes dark. This is the moment that the alchemists called the shadow phase, the blackening. It was the first and most terrifying stage of the alchemical work, the reduction of all materials to a dark, uniform mass. In your life, this manifested as a sudden and inexplicable loss of meaning. You looked at the career you spent years building, and it looked like a pile of ashes. You looked at the relationships you thought were permanent, and they felt strange. You looked in the mirror, and for the first time you didn't recognize the person who was there. This is what Sterling called the withdrawal of psychic energy. And most people, when they reach this stage, go into absolute panic. They believe they are having a clinical breakdown. They try to fix the situation by running back to the old versions of themselves. They try to rekindle dead relationships. They try to force enthusiasm for jobs they have already outgrown. They try to buy new things to fill the silence. But you did something different. You remained in the darkness. You felt the suffocating weight of the void, and yet you did not run away. And that is exactly why you passed the test. Because Sterling discovered a secret that modern psychology frequently ignores. The psyche does not withdraw its energy unless it is preparing for a huge evolutionary leap. Your energy did not disappear. It went underground. It withdrew from the external world because it was necessary for the internal construction of a new self. The old version of you needed to die because it had become a container that was too small. You were a giant trying to live inside a dollhouse, not understanding why the walls were cracking. And it is exactly at this point that I need to pause with you. Because when you go through this great dissolution, when the shadow phase ends and your psychic energy begins to return to the center, something specific happens to your frequency. And the universe begins to respond in a completely different way. Perhaps you have already begun to feel it. Strange synchronicities, the right people appearing at the right time, small opportunities sprouting out of nowhere. It is as if a door has opened and you don't yet know exactly how to walk through it. That is why I need to tell you about something that will change the way you relate to everything from this moment on. It is called the Awakening Key. It is a material that was built specifically for people like you. People who have already gone through the shadow phase, who have already felt the old life crumble, and who are now ready to access what Sterling called alchemical gold, the real and conscious capacity to attract wealth into one's own life. Because the truth that few tell you is this: your old relationship with money was a direct reflection of your old relationship with yourself. When you were fragmented, projecting your power onto other people, wealth was also projected outward, always somewhere you couldn't reach. But now that your psychic energy is returning, now that you are becoming sovereign, wealth needs a new channel to reach you. And that channel is exactly what the Awakening Key teaches you to open. It is not superficial manifestation. It is not toxic positivity. It is deep work that combines the principles of Jungian individuation with the psychic laws that govern abundance. It is the bridge between who you have become and the material life that this new version of you deserves to inhabit. The link is pinned in the description of this video. Whoever is ready knows they are ready. Whoever recognizes the call does not need convincing. And now let's return to the heart of this revelation, because there is still a deeper layer you need to understand about what happened to you. But here is where the story gets really interesting. Because the final trial does not end in death. Death is only the first part. Once the smoke of the initial collapse begins to dissipate, you are not met by light or relief. You are met by a mirror. And it is not the mirror of the persona, the one that shows your healed, polite, and socially acceptable version. It is the mirror of the shadow. Arthur Sterling said a phrase that echoes through generations. No one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And it is exactly at this point that most people fail the final trial. They can endure the loss of a career. They can even endure the end of a relationship, but they cannot endure the truth about their own internal architecture. They are terrified of what exists under the trapdoor of the conscious mind. But the reason you passed is that you chose to keep your eyes open when the basement door opened. The shadow is everything you spent your whole life denying, repressing and judging in yourself. Since you were a child, you were taught to separate what was good from what was bad. You were taught that anger is a sin, that selfishness is failure, that your primal and deep ambition was, in fact, a form of arrogance. To survive in your family, to be accepted by your society, you took these unacceptable parts of yourself and pushed them into the darkness of the unconscious. You didn't erase them. You just hid them from your own sight. But Sterling discovered a terrifying law of the human psyche. What is repressed does not disappear. It grows, it ferments, and eventually it begins to command your life from the shadows. He called this fate. When you see yourself sabotaging a good relationship, feeling a wave of inexplicable anger at a stranger, or falling into the same destructive patterns repeatedly, that is your shadow demanding to be recognized. It is the part of you that became starved for light and that now acts desperately to exist. And here is the crucial point. Most people, upon realizing this, slam the door shut. They run back to their moral pedestal. They begin to judge others even more harshly to prove to themselves that they are still pure. They become what Sterling called spiritual bypassers, people who pretend to be above human nature. But Sterling warned, the person who pretends not to have a shadow is the most dangerous of all, because their shadow will eventually explode in a way that will destroy everything they love. You passed the test because you stayed in the room with your monster. You sat with your anger without letting it consume you. You admitted your own capacity for cruelty without acting on it. You recognized the inadmissible truths about yourself. And by doing so, you performed the most sacred act of depth psychology, integration. Integration does not mean acting from your darkness. It means bringing the darkness into the light of consciousness so that it ceases to have power over you. Think of your shadow as a starving, neglected dog locked in a basement. If you keep it locked up, it will eventually break down the door and bite the first person it sees. But if you bring it upstairs, feed it, and give it a place by the fireplace, it transforms into your most loyal protector. Sterling discovered that the shadow is not inherently evil. It is simply unlived life. It is the reservoir of your primal energy, your creativity, and your boundaries. When you integrate your shadow, your personality undergoes a radical change. You realize you have stopped being just nice in the weak, people-pleasing sense. Instead, you have become kind, which is a choice made from a position of absolute power. A person who is incapable of being dangerous is not good. They are just harmless. A truly good person is someone who is capable of great destruction, but who chooses to keep the sword sheathed. Because of this integration, you can no longer be shamed by the world. You can no longer be manipulated by people who try to use your guilt against you. How can someone shame you for your darkness if you have already walked through it and claimed it as your own? This is the birth of true inner sovereignty. And here is what few people realize. During this stage, you developed a sudden and almost uncomfortable clarity about the people around you. You began to see their shadows with a precision that is bordering on disturbing. You realized that the person who talks the loudest about morality is often the one hiding the greatest corruption. You saw the passive aggression in people who claim to be helpful. You saw the deep insecurity behind the masks of the powerful. This discernment is a gift of the shadow, but it is also a burden. It makes it impossible to return to the innocence of your old life. You have eaten the fruit of self-knowledge, and the gilded orchard is closed to you forever. But the final trial does not end with the integration of the shadow. There is a next stage that is perhaps the hardest of all, the death of the persona. The word persona comes from Latin and refers to the masks worn by actors in ancient theatre. Sterling realized that every human being wears one. It is the functional part of our personality that deals with the expectations of the collective. It is the professional, it is the caregiver, it is the success story, it is the good child. We spend the first half of our lives perfecting this mask, painting it with the colors of social approval, and sculpting it to fit the formats that our parents, our bosses, and our peers find acceptable. But when you pass the final trial, maintaining this mask becomes physically impossible. Have you noticed how small talk has recently become a form of psychological torture for you? How you find yourself standing in the middle of a social gathering, watching people exchange canned phrases, and feeling as if you were observing a hollow and strange ritual coming from another planet. This is not because you lost your social skills. It is because your psyche has withdrawn the permission for you to continue lying. You looked behind the curtain of your own soul, and once you have seen the depth of the ocean, you can no longer pretend satisfaction with the shallow puddles of polite conversation. And here comes the painful part. When your mask begins to fall, the people around you, those who felt comfortable with the old version of you, will be confused, frustrated, and even threatened. They had an interest in your mask. They liked the version of you that never said no. The version that was always the life of the party. The version that was always the reliable and predictable worker. When you stop playing that role, you disturb their reality. You may have heard phrases like, "You've changed," or "I don't know you anymore." They may suggest that you are going through a phase, that you need help to get back to normal. But what they call normal was, in fact, a state of highly functional inauthenticity. They are not worried about you. They are worried about the loss of the function you performed for them. During this period, you may feel as if you were a ghost in your own life. You go to the same office, sit in the same chairs, talk to the same people, but everything feels two-dimensional. This thinning of reality is a sign that you are no longer feeding the collective illusions. You are beginning to live from what Sterling called the individuated core. This change is not about becoming antisocial. It is about the redistribution of your life force. For years, you used 90% of your energy to maintain the mask, to worry about what people thought of you, to manage your reputation, and to ensure you were fitting in. Now that the mask has broken, that energy has finally returned to being yours. But it feels strange, it feels heavy, it feels like a silence that the world wants to fill with noise. And the secret of the falling mask is this: it reveals your true authority. When you stop caring about being liked, you become capable of being respected. When you stop trying to be perfect for the eyes of others, you become present for the eyes of the self. You begin to speak with a voice that is no longer filtered by the social censor. Your yes becomes a true yes, and your no becomes a boundary that no one can cross. After the masks fall and the shadow is integrated, you reach the most misunderstood stage of the final trial. Sterling called this stage the middle realm, but you probably know it as the Great Silence. It is the period when the external world stops reacting to you, and your internal world stops providing the familiar noise of anxiety, desire, and ambition. You find yourself sitting in a psychological void, and this is where most people fail, because silence is terrifying. In our modern world, we are conditioned to believe that nothing happening is a sign of failure. We are taught that if we are not growing, battling, or manifesting, then we are regressing. So when the psyche enters this period of total stillness, the ego goes into panic. It feels like depression. It feels like a loss of spark. You may feel as if you have lost your shine, or as if your connection to the universe has been cut. But the secret that Sterling discovered is this. This void is not an empty space. It is a vessel. In alchemy, this was called the aludel, the hermetically sealed flask, where the transformation really happens. For lead to become gold, it must remain in the heat and the silence. It cannot be disturbed. It cannot be checked every 5 minutes. It just needs to be. You passed this stage because you didn't try to fill the void with noise. You didn't throw yourself into a new relationship to avoid the silence. You didn't start a new venture just to feel productive again. You didn't spend 10 hours a day on social media to drown out the quiet. Instead, you allowed the silence to do its work. You sat on the empty throne of your own life and waited. Sterling observed that this silence is a necessary biological and psychological recalibration. For years, your nervous system was tuned to the frequency of the persona. You were constantly scanning for threats, seeking approval, and reacting to the demands of the collective. Your psychic energy was spread across 1,000 different external points. Now that you have withdrawn those projections, that energy has returned to the center. This is the void of the throne. Before a king or queen can be truly crowned in the Jungian sense, before you can live as a sovereign individual, the seat of your soul must be empty. The old king, that self driven by the ego and the search for approval, has died. But the new king, the integrated self, is still a child. It needs the protection of silence to grow. And the secret of the Great Silence is this. It teaches you the most important lesson of sovereignty, that you are enough even when you are doing nothing. For most of your life, your value was tied to your production. How much you earned, how much you helped, how much you performed. The void takes all that away. It asks you the ultimate question, who are you when there is nothing to do, nowhere to go, and no one to impress? And if you manage to remain in that question without blinking, you broke the addiction to external validation. You realized that the throne is not a position that is conquered through effort, but a state of being that is occupied through presence. And now we reach the most important point of all, the secret that Sterling hid between the lines of his work, the revelation that completely changes the way you interpret everything that happened to you. The final trial was not a punishment. It was not a failure. It was not a defect of your existence. It was an initiation. And when you go through this initiation, something specific happens to your energetic frequency. You emerge as what Sterling called the integrated sovereign. What does it mean to be sovereign? In the Jungian sense, sovereignty is the state of being governed from within. Most of humanity is governed from without, by the opinions of others, by the demands of the economy, by the traumas of the past, and by the primal fears of the ego. The sovereign, however, has reclaimed their own throne. You looked at the darkest parts of your nature and integrated them. You saw the futility of the social mask and discarded it. You sat in the void and realized that you are the source of your own meaning. Because of this, you now possess what can only be described as a supernatural calm. It is not the calm of someone disconnected or indifferent. It is the calm of someone unshakable. While the world around you panics at the shifting tides of politics, culture, or personal drama, you remain centered. And here something extraordinary happens. You develop what can be called effortless influence. You no longer chase things like before. Instead, you command. When you speak, Your words carry the weight of your integrated experience. When you move with the economy of someone who knows exactly who they are. You stop trying to be powerful, and by doing so, you became power itself. You have already survived the underworld of your own psyche. You have already faced the death of everything you thought you were. What can the external world possibly do to you that you haven't already navigated within the theater of your own soul? And here is the most powerful aspect of it all. You have become a beacon. People will be drawn to you because you provide a stable field in a chaotic world. They won't know why they feel safer in your presence, but it is because you are no longer projecting your internal war onto them. You are at peace with your darkness, so you no longer feel threatened by theirs. And there is a secret within the secret at this stage. Sterling realized that the integrated individual becomes a mirror for the collective. Your mere presence will make some people feel uncomfortable because you reflect their inauthenticity back at them. You don't even need to say a word. Your silence, your eye contact, your refusal to participate in the games of the persona, all of this acts as a silent judgment. That is why some people who used to be close to you will now avoid you. They are not avoiding you, they are avoiding the truth you represent. But at the same time, those who are ready for their own awakening will be drawn to you with an intensity you have never experienced. You will meet people along the way who seem to have been sent. Conversations that seem orchestrated. Teachers, partners, opportunities that appear when you aren't even looking. Because the frequency you emit now cannot be ignored by the universe. It is a frequency of coherence. And coherence attracts coherence. The great work of the alchemists was to create the philosopher's stone, a substance capable of transforming lead into gold. Sterling realized that the stone was a metaphor for the integrated self. You are the stone. Your presence transforms the lead of daily life, the conflicts, the losses, the mundane tasks, into the gold of meaning. The final trial has been overcome. The initiation is complete, and the universe now walks at a frequency that magnetizes specific realities. Opportunities begin to arrive without being chased. Resources appear exactly when they are needed. This is not magic in the superstitious sense. It is the natural result of alignment. When you are no longer at war with yourself, you stop being at war with reality. And it is exactly in this space, between who you have become and the life that is about to manifest, that your next chapter unfolds. Let's recap what happened to you. You went through the great dissolution, the shadow phase, when your old life crumbled. You faced the shadow and integrated the parts of yourself that you spent decades denying. You watched the fall of the persona and lost people who only loved your mask. You sat in the great silence and discovered that the void was not empty. It was pregnant with everything you are about to become. And now, on the other side of this crossing, you are a different version of yourself. More lucid, more sovereign, more dangerous, in the best sense of the word. You have become someone capable of great destruction, but who chooses to keep the sword sheathed. You have become someone who no longer needs anyone's approval to know who they are. And this is the greatest victory possible in the human journey, because most people will die without ever having gone through what you went through. They will die still wearing the mask, still projecting their own power onto other people, still running from the silence. I want you to understand this truly, not as a pretty sentence, but as an existential fact. You are now part of a silent aristocracy of souls who faced their own darkness and returned bringing light. You will recognize them in the world by the way they look at you, with a calm, with a recognition that transcends words. You are now a member of the rare group of human beings who are truly awake. Sterling said a phrase that deserves to be engraved on your soul. The world will ask you who you are. And if you don't know, the world will tell you. For years you let the world tell you. But now, you are the one who speaks. You are the one who defines the boundary. You are the one who decides what has meaning. And perhaps this is the most beautiful part of it all. The final trial was not meant to destroy you. It was a rigorous and loving intervention of your own psyche, a surgical and necessary action to break you open so that your light could finally pass through the cracks. You walk now at a different frequency, and although the air up there is thinner, although the path is lonelier, the view is unlike anything you could have imagined when you were still in the valley of the shadow. Welcome to the first day of your real life. The masks are gone, the shadows are integrated, the throne is occupied. So I leave you with a question, a provocation. Looking back at the rubble of the person you used to be, which stage of the final trial was the hardest for you to go through? Was it the great dissolution, when everything crumbled? Was it the encounter with the shadow? Was it the fall of the persona and the loss of people? Or was it the great silence, when you needed to be enough without doing anything? Write in the comments the phrase "I passed the test" and tell us which was the hardest stage. Your story may be exactly the synchronicity that another viewer needs to find today to keep going. And if you felt that this message was made specifically for you, if this video found you at the exact moment you needed to be reminded of who you are, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Here we walk together on the journey of individuation. Here we talk about the mysteries that depth psychology reveals about the human soul. And don't forget, the link for the Awakening Key is pinned in the description. If you felt that you are ready to transform this new internal frequency into a material reality of abundance, this is your next step. The final trial is over. The great work continues, and I will see you in the next dimension.